Good evening. I'd like to bring this meeting of the Oshkosh Board of Education to order on Wednesday, December 18th, 2013. Has this meeting been properly? Actually, I guess we're already in. Yes, we're reconvening into open session. We had a closed session before this. So, we don't need to recall the roll then, I'm assuming. All right. Let's see, executive session, reconvene into open session. Pledge of Allegiance. Tonight we'll be led in the Pledge of Allegiance by two of our Oshkosh West High School students, one of which you've seen before here this evening, Tony Smestead and Dave Mathers. If you would rise and lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Actually, I'd like to thank you, and as tradition holds, we will offer you thank you very much. Thank you, and thank you very much. Okay. After that, the presentation of middle and high school art awards. Are you going to read them?
I'm prepared to.
All right, then I will stand up. If basically, if, as you're called, you come up, we will give you a certificate.
And if you would note the fact that projected on the screen is a image of the artwork in question, and to honor each student. Our first recognition is Tony Smestead.
Congratulations.
Meadow Ahmad. Is Meadow here? Marley Misko. Mary Neubauer.
Cool stuff. Congratulations.
Maddie Meets. Tia Ithaway Enders. Helen Gajewski. Pai Ying Lo. Taylor Ware. Rowan Foreb Parrish. Emily Roth. Jacob Zindars. Caitlin Landolt. Kyle Bergazzi. Megan Cole.
Congratulations.
Jada Douglas. Kennedy Romanfinger. Haley Clark. Roxanne Copenhaver. Maximus Kruger. Ewan Quinn.
That's Dakota.
Dakota Laberhaber. Andrew Stender. Elizabeth DeVoe. Jacob Schlichting. Lexi McCarthy. Carrie Bielfus. Deja Rodriguez. Angelica Halbach. Christian Labas. Quinn Lacertus Kunz. And Liz James. Thank you so much.
Congratulations to all of our artistic achievement winners. If we can give them all a round of applause. That was truly some amazing stuff. I will also announce that you needn't. You're more than welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting, but you're not required to.
And I would like to express my appreciation to both Sherry in my office and building administrators and secretaries across the secondary portion of the district who provided me with a wonderful phonics lesson to attempt to deal with many of these. It helps to have phonetic explanations, and I get somewhat close with phonics, so most appreciated.
All right. Next we have administrative reports. I have nothing for the president's report. Is there anything for the superintendent?
Yes, we have a rather extensive list at this time of the year for superintendent's report for December 18th, 2013. First of all, indication of Green Meadow Elementary School with the fourth grade students participate in a chocolate chip cookie mining activity. The hands-on learning activity provided students with fun, anticipatory set to get them excited about the upcoming mining unit. Each student was given a chocolate chip cookie and as the land and a toothpick as their mining equipment, and students were responsible for completing the mining process of their cookies. Students also made real-life connection between using this activity and what they learned to discuss the non-renewable resources. The activity generated many thoughtful discussions, and I'm sure some good cookie eating at the end. Oshkosh North football received the WIAA Rural Mutual Insurance Sportsmanship Award. This is really an outstanding accomplishment for the school and the school district. Congratulations to Oshkosh North football fans for receiving the 2013 Football WIAA Rural Mutual Insurance Sportsmanship Award. It says a lot about the character of the school's football program, the players, coaches, athletic trainers, and the fans, students, and adults. The Sportsmanship Award is presented to one school, program, and community in each of the state tournaments that exemplifies outstanding sportsmanship. Award winners are determined by the conduct and sportsmanship displayed by athletes, the coaches, cheer groups, support groups, mascots, bands, and spectators. Additional consideration is given to the effort of school administrators and chaperones to ensure that their teams are positive and the highest ideals of sportsmanship are upheld. Way to go North. There will be a recognition ceremony for this award during halftime of boys basketball game coming up late in January or early February to honor and celebrate the outcome for Oshkosh North High School. Oshkosh North High School students participated in the Skills USA district competition. Congratulations to North High School students who completed and placed in their events during December 11th Skill USA district competition, which was held at North High School. We have the complete listing of students and the activities that were contained in that. Congratulations, especially to Quentin Miller for his first place finish a week earlier at Oshkosh in the Skills USA CNC district competition. TIPLER Middle School, student community committed to excellence. Carl Lemke's commitment to excellence earned him the first place in the Veterans Day essay contest. Great job, Kyle. Kyle is in 6th grade and look forward to more great work from Kyle. Dalen Davis is using a scroll saw to create some detailed ornaments. The scroll saw uses the same concept as a sewing machine with major difference cutting apart instead of putting together. The commitment to excellence in success, Kira Hessler and Daryl Rausch are showing their commitment to excellence in their manufacturing technology class. Kira and Daryl show that with great pride the work they continually do in class. What a good example. Both of these students recently finished these beautiful 2-drawer jewelry chests. Their dedication to getting a well-rounded education with the quality in the final product. I'm sure there must be some wonderful Mother's Christmas gift built into that one. Merrill Writing Institute participants work collaboratively to improve student writing. Grant funds secured through a partnership with the Fox Valley Writing Project have provided teachers at Merrill Elementary an opportunity to examine student writing in depth and develop an understanding of the continuum of expectations in the Common Core state standards in writing and their implications for teaching and assessment. Teachers will spend the rest of the year engaged in an inquiry project to study the area of writing and to improve student learning. Teamwork. Oakwood Eagles report the 4th grade students and Ms. Erin Herman's class at Oakwood Elementary have been busy from November 19th through December 2nd collecting, sorting, and boxing items to donate to the Oshkosh Salvation Army. The students make posters to encourage donations and delivered announcements to the school about the progress of the collection. In all, nearly 1,000 food items were collected to help the Oshkosh area community. Thanks for your generosity and great job. Merrill Elementary 5th graders helped out with the food pantry by stuffing holiday bags in December, and you see the quantity and the production line that was well underway at Merrill Elementary. Oshkosh West students participate in choir events. Oshkosh West Choir sang with Doc Severinsen and the Fox Valley Symphony this past weekend. Pictured to the left are Bridget Duffy, Ben Wiss, choral director at Watoma High School, and Herb Brendenson and Doc Severinsen certainly in the middle there. The choir also collaborated in the work Gloria by John Rutter at the First Congregational Church last Thursday night, and you see those pictures included. Holiday mail for heroes from Franklin Elementary students. With the help of Staff Sergeant Adrian Benson and 5th grade class, the students at Franklin Elementary are participating in a Holiday Mail for Heroes program. This program sends handmade cards to troops and veterans around the world. The 5th graders travel to the Wisconsin Veterans Home at King to hand deliver the cards. Staff Sergeant Benson and students at Franklin were featured on WFRV. Following the link, you can watch that news clip, and these notices are also posted so you can lift them easily off the district website. Jefferson students participate in an hour in the Hour of Code. Jefferson students participate in the Hour of Code during the computer Computer Science Education Week. The Hour Code is a 1-hour introduction to computer programming designed to demystify code and show that anyone can learn it. Franklin students show their support. The 5th graders at Franklin Elementary are supporting the anti-bullying campaign, ABC, by wearing scarves made by volunteers. The students are wearing the scarves each day to support the campaign. Thanks to the Oshkosh community and Kathy Chapman for helping students to stop bullying. This is taking place on December 6th, and you'll find a list of superintendent's activities. I believe I'm well into quite a number of concerts in this holiday season, as has had a chance to participate in a good number of things, and as Sherry did say to me, you are becoming Mr. Music. So with that, that completes the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mr. Mack. Next, actually, we didn't have a listening session this evening. So.
But we have a report from last week.
Oh, we do?
Last
All
time.
right.
Yes. Mm-hmm. We had 3 guests at the listening session. One was to discuss Lakeside Green Manual situation and solutions, and also discussed the January survey that's being proposed regarding the area. I responded back regarding the potential funding of a future addition to Lakeside, and talking about how we can recreate a comprehensive K-5 school at that site with that additional funding. A second guest wanted to discuss the focus on testing and losing the art of teaching, not feeling good about the future of education with all the testing occurring. And Julie Mosier explained the legislative requirements for standardized testing, and we all fully understand the issue of over-testing with that. We had a teacher present who wanted to discuss some personal items, of which that process is still underway. We have some sense. Dr. Jones took the teacher aside to learn more about the issue, and I'll be meeting with the teacher individually in the near future regarding the issue. So those are the 3 items from last week's listening, or 2 weeks ago, listening hour.
All right. Thank you very much. Other reports? Do other board members have a report?
The Education Committee met on December 12th. We covered several items, some of which will be coming to the board as a workshop. A good amount of time was spent on the middle school course elective offerings. No changes in courses there, but a proposal is being worked on in terms of configuring them, reconfiguring them in the best interest of student needs and student learning, to give the youth some different choices, different ways of moving through the wheel. However, the physical activity topic did come up a little bit, and how to continually look at ways to keep youth more active, and that will be coming to the board sometime as a workshop in January. We had an update on the 4K program. Also will be coming to a board workshop in January. I believe they also met with facilities and finance, so we're probably all pretty up to date on that. And then Dr. Geigley gave us a mental health and at-risk update in terms of meeting with Teen Screen, follow-up to the host workshop, and some of the at-risk updates. And the next meeting is Thursday, January 9th.
Just out of curiosity, were there any specific highlights on the Teen Screen update?
Just that Mr. Mack and Dr. Geigley are working with representatives to get the details. Nothing really more than that.
Thank you.
I could just add that we're still working on a starting time and starting date, because they're still working on arranging the soft funding.
Okay. And just finally, the minutes are still in the works, and so once those are finalized, they'll be distributed, and you can have the specifics.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Other reports? Mr. Dito?
Policy and governance met. The bulk of our time was spent on our ongoing quest to deal with a lot of the suggested WASB revisions when we went through our quick review update last year. Policy 761, which the committee recommended for approval this evening, Needed some updating. That's on free or reduced price meals. That hasn't been updated since 1997. 370 extracurricular activities was focused on terminology that was more inclusive and including specific information on equity. That was also a WASB update. The committee moves for approval on that this evening. Drug and alcohol testing, policy 521. That's in our thing this evening and was moved forward for approval. That hasn't been updated since 1996. 411, equal opportunities. This was brought up by a WASB review, and it mainly deals with using language changes like removing handicapped and putting in the word disability, those kind of things, to kind of get in more of a modern terminology with a comparative to our other policies. We recommend approval of that. Seclusion and restraint was discussed, 44721. That was the committee recommends that for approval this evening. This dealt with almost specifically with, entirely rather, with the result last year, what was it, September 2012 of Act 125, which deals with the increase in reporting on when seclusion and restraint is used, and the new policy reflects that. Bloodborne pathogen plan 453 as part of the WASB review. We recommend that for approval this evening. We also had a special needs voucher discussion. We'll probably be bringing back some wording for a potential resolution. It would be a non-binding resolution. We might be asking the board to take a stand on this as far as how we feel about special needs vouchers. Right now, currently, the way it stands, under, especially like under Act 125, a person who's in a private institution who would get a special needs voucher, number one, they're giving up their rights under the federal IDEA program, and number two, the reporting requirements that we as a public entity under Act 125, as far as seclusion and restraint, the private entity would not have, the private school would not have to report on when they use seclusion and restraint the way that we have to. And our feeling is that even though we might be the first school district in the state to come out on a side about this issue, that if we're going to use taxpayer dollars between the two entities for special education, it should be done in an accountable and transparent and equal fashion between public and private institutions. And that is policy and governance.
All right, very busy. Thank you very much. There's a lot on the docket this evening.
That's why we get the big bucks, Matt.
Allison?
Facilities and Finance met, let's see, last week. We talked just briefly, updated on Oakland spending. We still have a little over 200 grand remaining. We spent about 40 grand on equipment type things, and they're looking for more needs as the school district, as that school continues to operate. Then we also talked about 4K. Kim Brown came in and presented to us, and basically, of all the 4K eligible kids in Oshkosh, 92% of them are enrolled. So it's a huge success. That's about 673 kids. That's obviously a large proportion. Most of our elementary schools don't have more than 350. So that's a big program. And right now, they're feeling like they don't have enough support, and so they're asking for additional finances for additional support. They have 18 sites, and only 3 of those are internal to the district. The rest are external, so it's kind of a logistical nightmare. They're requesting a full-time secretary and a full-time administrator. And the only concern at this time will be, obviously funding. Where are we going to come up with that funding? How are we going to fund it? And then staffing partway through the year. Those were 2 major concerns. But we are going to move this forward to the full board. So this will be a workshop coming up. Then we talked about post-employment benefits for administrators. There was a committee. They came forward with several options. There's lots of different plans out there. So we asked for help from Ken Zastro with the National Insurance Services, and they basically have come back with, it's kind of like an HRA or an HSA, and it'll be a tiered approach.
but essentially the administrators will be vested, and we're going to tier it so that we can grandfather the people who have been in the system for long enough, and then we'll tier. There'll be 3 different tiers, and that will be brought to the board for workshop in January. So learn more details there. Sorry. And then the last item was the Webster Stanley Auditorium, which is where this particular meeting was held. That discussion was led by Phil Marshall, a principal, and also Kathy Shearer, who is a parent there. She has headed up a committee to fund a renovation of that auditorium, which, after having seen it firsthand, was completely embarrassing. I was embarrassed by that auditorium. So it needs to be fixed. It has not been maintained since 1955. It's in horrible shape. And they are only asking the district to come up with 50% of the funds to renovate, and they're going to try to come up with the other 50% through fundraising. They're going to go through the Oshkosh Community Foundation, and there'll be more coming on that. And that was our next meeting is scheduled for January 23rd.
All right, thank you very much. Are there any other committees? Any other reports? All right. Next, the non-agenda related public forum. Do we have anyone who wishes to speak this evening on a non-agenda related public item? Something that's not on tonight's agenda? Seeing none, we will move on to the agenda related public forum. Is there anyone who wishes to speak tonight on agenda related item? Something that is on the agenda? Seeing none, we will move on to the consent resolution agenda. For the consent agenda, the board has been furnished with background material on each item or has discussed it at a previous meeting. These will be acted upon with one vote without discussion. If a board member wants to discuss any item, it will be pulled out of the consent agenda and will be voted on separately. Does anyone wish to pull anything from tonight's agenda? Yes.
Number 12.
Number 12.
Number 9.
Number 9. Anything else? All right. The board will consider approval of 1, minutes of special board meeting November 13th, 2013. 2, minutes of special board meeting executive session on November 13th, 2013. 3, minutes of regular board meeting on November 20th, 2013. 4, minutes of regular board meeting and executive session on November 20th, 2013. 5, minutes of regular board meeting on December 4th, 2013. 6, minutes of regular board meeting executive session on December 4th, 2013. 7, bills payable. 8, personnel. A, appointments, temporary appointments, resignations, retirements, and salary schedule. 10, site department carryover of funds. 11, superintendent contract. 13, NTEA support staff step and longevity movement. 14, revisions to policies 761, free and reduced price meals. 15, revisions to policy 370, extracurricular activities and programs. 16, revisions to policy 522.1, 1, drug and alcohol testing. 17, revisions to policy 411, equal opportunity and educational equity. Number 18, revisions to policy 410, student policy goals. Number 19, revisions to policy 447.21, use of seclusion and restraint. Number 20, revisions to policy 453.33, student bloodborne pathogens exposure control plan. 21, revisions to policy 526, employee bloodborne pathogen exposure control plan. And number 22, OPEA, support staff longevity movement.
So moved.
Second.
Call the roll.
Saginac?
Aye.
Saginac, aye. Wiedenhoff?
Aye.
Wiedenhoff, aye. Dito?
Aye.
Dito, aye. Eliason?
Aye.
Eliason, aye. Garner?
Aye.
Garner, aye. Herzog?
Aye.
Herzog, aye. Lundberger?
Aye.
Lundberger, aye. Motion carried.
All right. Be it resolved that the Oshkosh Area School District Board of Education approve the 2013 through 2016 Information and Technology Plan as filed with the Secretary of the Board of Education.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion?
Yeah, I wanted to pull this just because there was some questions and some emails kind of circulating right before the meeting today. So I just felt like we should make sure that we hash this out one last time if there was any question. So it wasn't as a criticism of the technology plan as it stands, but I guess I wanted to make sure that we were all on the same page, and I'm not sure that we are. The email that I had sent back to Dave and to Stan today said, essentially, from what I'm understanding, I'd like to boil things down. This technology plan, one-to-one and, further professional development and having tech coaches, will improve student performance. This is the number one goal of all of this, is so that we can individualize education and enhance their performance. The second was to allow for innovation in the classroom, like flipping classrooms and having teachers as coaches rather than lecturers, blah, blah, blah. But basically driving education, and that these devices and other types of technologies are going to drive that innovation. And so I want to make sure that we're all on the same page, that we can't innovate unless we do this. And so that he was kind of confirming that. I want to make sure you guys all confirm that. And then the last thing was that, we'll have some cost savings because we'll minimize or eliminate textbook stuff. Not all books, but obviously this will take the place of a lot of that. So we will see some cost savings there. I guess for me, I want to make sure that there is this understanding that all of this is driving efficiency, and that we will be able to do more innovation and do more individualization with our kids. So is that everybody else's understanding with why we're voting for this tonight?
Well, I guess if you hadn't pulled this, I had planned to for a slightly different reason.
Okay.
But yes, I guess my understanding is that there's an A and a B in this. And the reason I was going to actually pull it was because it wasn't really called out whether we were voting to implement A or B, and obviously we can't implement B at this point, so I wanted to actually just pull this so that we could have a discussion about the fact that this does not mean that we are in any way implementing Plan B, and if
Okay.
it does, and perhaps we need to modify this slightly or do something so that people realize that we're not going one-to-one with this, because that is beyond our capabilities within our current budget limitations. And
That's
that,
actually stated in the
Yep.
plan. That really, we are, right now, if the plan is approved, it is a Plan A
Yep.
Right.
scenario, because Plan B is clearly impossible without additional revenue. But we wanted to make sure that you had Plan B in your hand,
Yep.
that if you choose to go there, that we were already done with that legwork.
and the other thing I guess I wanted to emphasize was that the Plan A, the little box was missing at the bottom saying the cost implication for. And I just wanted to make sure that we are all on the same page. This is not a. This does not elevate your current budget.
No.
Plan A is within
Current
the
budget
amount
as it
that
exists.
we give, or the amount that we allocate towards IT every year as it is.
Yes.
And I want to make sure that that was stated, that we knew that we were not, we didn't have that nice little box that said no budget impact.
Right.
So I wanted to make sure that that was clear.
And in Plan B, if it were approved, we're by having additional revenue, then creates an additional $1.6 million supplement to that. But
Right.
the plan is fully in effect without the one-to-one element with the existing budget.
Well, and I guess to your earlier
Yes.
point, to me, that's the one-to-one isn't a goal so much as the individualized learning that could be accomplished if we get there. And for me, I guess that's what I'm hoping for with this, is that the idea that we could develop individualized learning goals for each child is, I think, a fantastic idea.
The other way I would also characterize this is not only is this about innovation, but it's also about connecting our kids outside the four walls of the school. And that is a big piece of 21st century learning, is how do we create learning opportunities that are not restricted to Oshkosh. And that's clearly made possible when the students had actually a device to communicate to the outside world, and that's a big part of it. So
We're
those two
actually
do go hand in hand.
At the university level, I know that there are universities across the country that are actually, they're not really doing it's sort of a flipped classroom, but it's a modified classroom.
Sure.
And they're looking at basically a larger number of students with
Yes.
limited number of resources, basically, a limited number of professors or TAs in a room, and they've basically grouped the kids into small pods or teams to work on these things in their own classrooms, and they're doing it basically because all the kids are at that point one-to-one. They're all working together, and they're basically taking their lecture out.
Yes.
The being one-to-one allows them to sit and watch the lecture at home. So instead of having a lecture in a lab, the lecture has sort of gone away. The lecture is something that they can do on their own time, just like reading text, except obviously it can be three-dimensional and can do things that a flat text cannot. But then the time that they're actually spending with the TAs and the professors themselves
It's minutes per student.
it's
a new metric.
drastically increased.
Yeah.
So if we can do that, I think we're going to show Wisconsin something that they haven't seen in public education.
And we should note the fact, and I think Allison summarized Dave's weekend work. I had asked Dave middle to late last week to give the board some more information regarding this issue, and that became his weekend project, and was prepared on Monday with a full report that you've received. The other piece that we need to always bear in mind is to preserve our district and to do well competitively. Frankly, this is where we need to be in order to compete with our sister districts. Others will pass us by. Others have passed us by. We can play catch-up eventually in this process, but it becomes the new norm. And if we sit on our hands and say, well, I don't think we want to move ahead with this, we are placing ourselves in jeopardy of not being really effectively competitive, not only with our own student-based population, but with the potential of growing.
Well, I think one of the things that, Mr. Eliason's always bringing up is, are we competing for the same dollars with bringing kids outside the classroom and doing innovative things with them, or is it this? Is it this or that? And I wonder if, in some way, that we can start doing those things because of these things. If we can increase the efficiency of how we teach, change things, blow up the system a little bit, not the whole thing, but be able to, instead of having a lecture, we find the best lecture on the internet, and kids will watch that, and then teachers are more like coaches. And that would boost efficiency. That increases individualized learning. That increases the time that a student receives individualized time from a teacher. It's not students per teacher anymore. It's how many minutes you get of that teacher one-on-one. And if we can free up teachers in that way, I wonder if some of those other things could start to happen. So I wonder if it's not necessarily, we have a fixed bucket that you can either do this or you can do that, but you can't have both. And I'm wondering if maybe what we're learning, or maybe something that we can do that other districts don't, is to use this to be able to do those things.
I guess I agree with everything I've heard here. But to me, I guess those things are all somewhat pragmatic, logistical considerations. Yes, we need to be more competitive. Yes, we need to be more efficient. And those are all a part of this overall plan. I guess for myself, though, I look at student engagement, and there's a saying out there, if they can't learn the way we teach them, we need to teach the way they learn. And kids right now with this kind of technology, they're absorbing this at a rate that's exponentially incredible. And if we don't stay up with this, they're going to become bored, and they're going to go through this at a C level, and it's just going to be a C level for the first few years in their 20s, where if we can excite them, where we can ignite them, right now, with what's out there, employing some of what Steve is saying, what everybody else at this table is saying about individualized education. I mean, I see the ramifications within special education, how that this could could open up a child's opportunities here. All of those things. To me, this is an incredible opportunity for us to not only catch up with other districts around us, but to actually start leading in a way that we should be leading as a community on our children. And I hope that we continue down this path with this and make this possible.
There are three things I'd like to see eventually, and it won't be tonight. One would be that we have a curriculum scope and sequence by grade level, by content area that's communicated clearly to the students and their parents and the staff. Secondly, that we develop measures or metrics for determining what's the impact on student learning. Because if we're spending all this money and we're not progressing, for example, in our reading scores or our math scores, then are we more efficient?
Right.
Was this worth the capital investment? Or are there other measures or other means, I should say, that would be more effective to improve student learning? So to me, it's about improving student learning, and I love the idea of an individualized plan. Thirdly, I think there needs to be a timeline, and maybe you've developed this already and I just missed it. There needs to be a timeline for implementation, so every school and every staff and parent group knows what equipment, what professional development is coming to their school soon, and when will one of these devices be in the hands of their child or their grandchild. I think that's critical. I keep thinking of that lady from Smith School in the rain, in May, in the Brat Barn over at Festival, Pick and Save West, trying to raise money for 2 or 3 iPads. Not a very efficient way to go about raising funds. And when I asked her about a district plan, she didn't know of any district plan. She didn't know where Smith was in the hierarchy of receiving things. I think there needs to be a spreadsheet, something so that everybody knows across the district when this equipment, when the staff development, et cetera, are coming to a school near you.
Steve, you've been referred to a lot this evening. Would you like to say anything?
Defend yourself, man.
Reference accepted. Thank you. Sweetheart. I would weigh in, and clearly not as a skeptic, not as a bomb thrower. The questions that run through my head in the STEM and part from a Wisconsin Public Radio program this morning at 8 o'clock. Guest author talking about where technology, smartphones, these things fit into life today as we speak. And she had survey results that were fascinating. And this, for some reason, the sample group, it was a female group that was polled. And the basics of life that women in this case would give up to keep their smartphone was shocking to me. The basic stuff of life. Okay? And I won't go beyond that, but let's just say the basic stuff of life. And it speaks to something I've observed in photography, that people that I know in the industry say, years ago, it was a hard sell to convince somebody they needed a good Swedish camera with German optics, because it seems too expensive. But supplant that with a digital camera, and it's like a done deal. $2,000, no problem. $5,000, sure. So my cautionary tale is we seem to be at still an obsession point with these sorts of devices. And so my concern is that we follow that obsession to a potentially bad end. Mm-hmm. And so my clarion call would be for some sort of parity, like Ms. Garner referred to. I know, Matt, like we've talked about your Alaska trip, where if we can have both the real tangible experience and the ability to go back there at will, I think that's an ideal scenario. Thanks.
I wanted to address the curriculum piece before, where you had said about we could be saving money or reducing on curriculum materials or curriculum resources. I want to be cautiously optimistic about that, because what we're finding is our companies that supply textbook or curriculum materials to us. Now what they're saying is you can get the hard copy book or you can get the ebook because you're paying for the content, and they're the exact same prices. So
they're no dummies.
No, but what I do predict is that instead of paying a textbook company or a curriculum resource company for that I would like to see our own staff doing curriculum writing and putting together Google sites and different ways of packaging their own curriculum and authentic and primary resources. And we did some of that work with 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, and 9th grade social studies, where they did their own primary resources sites. And so instead of accessing the textbook, the students were going directly to the site to get primary resources through a partnership with UWO. So, those are the types of things that I envision we're going to be spending curriculum resources on.
Great.
So.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I would just comment back to one, Steve has always talked about our abandoning facilities. Now, to the extent that we are not necessarily, there are not a lot of elementary parents who would want to have their children freelancing at home all day trying to be online, but to a certain extent, there are other students who are, particularly at the secondary level, will be able to operate independently and maybe do that in non-traditional sites, maybe in libraries, maybe in other locations that our potential need, even with enrollment growth, for additional capital bricks and mortar type structures may be lessened in the long run as well because of the potential choice of learning in non-traditional settings. I think we're solidly into the combination of learning and childcare at the same time, which would make, we got to always acknowledge that schools are childcare as well as a place for children to safely be. But at the secondary level, I could easily see a whole lot of transition, and with independent learning, the reality of being able at age 16 to be fully taking advantage of resources at the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh as an option, as opposed to maybe occupying space in one of our buildings. And I see that as really a part of that bricks and mortar change, because you're seeing that you think about how many less retail stores exist today because of how much online shopping is going on. The reality and learning that will also occur.
Yeah.
Right. Call the roll.
Wiedenhoff?
Aye.
Wiedenhoff, aye. Vito?
Aye.
Vito, aye. Eliason?
Aye.
Eliason, aye. Garner?
Aye.
Garner, aye. Herzog?
Aye.
Herzog, aye. Lemberger?
Aye.
Lemberger, aye. Segenak?
Aye.
Segenak, aye. Motion carried.
Be it resolved that the Oshkosh Area School District Board of Education approve the host Helping Our Students Thrive program according to the provisions of the Memorandum of Agreement as filed with the Secretary of the Board of Education.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion?
I had asked that this be pulled because it was the only way I could figure out how to thank Dr. Geigley and the members of his team for putting together an excellent report, very well written, and addresses numerous needs among our students and their families. And so my reason for pulling this was to commend Dr. Geigley for his efforts on this particular report and the implementation. So thank you.
Well, I appreciate that. I want to acknowledge the people from TIPLER Health as well, and Julie and Kim for being a part of that as well. So, but thank you, appreciate it. We hope that it'll be on its way rather soon.
And we have Sue Panic here this evening, who has joined us out of caring for this, because without how many years, Sue? 7 years, you said it's taken to get to this place, and so patience and persistence is one of those. And Sue, in leading the United Way and being a co-funder with this and supporting this effort, but the idea is 7 years old and it's finally coming to maturity.
Please call the roll.
Vito?
Aye.
Vito, aye. Eliason?
Aye.
Eliason, aye. Garner?
Aye.
Garner, aye. Herzog?
Aye.
Herzog, aye. Lemberger?
Aye.
Lemberger, aye. Segenak?
Aye.
Segenak, aye. Wiedenhoff?
Aye.
Wiedenhoff, aye. Motion carried.
All right, individually considered resolutions. Number 23, WASB Resolution to Delegate Assembly. Be it resolved that the Oshkosh Area School District Board of Education hereby direct the WASB delegate to support resolutions forwarded to all WASB members prior to the convening of the assembly. Be it further resolved that the WASB delegate is directed to vote on amendments or resolutions that arise from the floor of the delegate assembly in a manner that is consistent with the position of the original resolutions as filed with the Secretary to the Board of Education on December 18th, 2013, in accordance with the rules, regulations, and policies of the Board of Education.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. Actually, I'm hoping for a little discussion on this. I reviewed some of these and made some notes, and I'm going to dig them out here. I guess my first one was on Resolution 14-7, Educator Effectiveness. The WASB is, it says, the WASB rejects any interpretation of educator effectiveness initiatives that would limit the school board's rights to review this data, to decide what data is relevant, and to use the data for any lawful purpose. Actually, I guess I have to bypass that one because I'm not sure why I had an arrow next to it anymore. It seems reasonable. Amend existing resolutions. Support rural local school board governance. Let me skip on to, okay, well, I'll go down to Resolution 14-13, I guess, which should be more straightforward. The WASB opposes legislation requiring all school buses to be equipped with seat belts for students. However, the WASB supports legislation to require newly manufactured school buses to be equipped with safety belts. And then it says, provided the state provides funding to defray the cost. I think that if we go down there, I'd like to propose a motion to strike that last part of the sentence, basically.
You don't want the state to pay for it?
Whether or not the state pays for it.
We should be doing it.
We should be doing it.
Yep.
So, the idea that we're going to only support safety if,
As long as
somebody else
puts
pays
the bill.
for it, but if somebody else isn't going to pay for it, we're not going to support safety. It seems kind of a poor substitute. So I guess I would like permission, I guess, from the board. I'm not sure. Pardon?
You don't need a motion for that.
Okay, I don't need a motion for that. But basically to offer up that as an amendment when we go down there. There was another one in here. WASB opposes the creation of Wisconsin of a recovery school district similar to state level authority designed to take over an attempt to improve performance of low performing public schools. I guess I was curious to know what other people thought about 14-11 recovery school districts.
It's worth a shot. I don't have a problem with it.
Because basically this motion is saying that WASB opposes the creation of recovery school districts. That the WASB opposes the creation of Wisconsin of a recovery school district or a similar state level authority designed to take over an attempt to improve performance of low performing school districts.
My understanding of this would be, excuse me, if you're familiar with some of the politics of Michigan, they have their right essentially to disband local government entities and put in their place corporations. If they feel that the town of Flint, Michigan, city of Flint or something, is running amok so badly, they actually have the right on the state level to revoke the charter, or whatever you want to call it, of that particular entity. That's my understanding, and I would suggest when I looked at this that that is the same type of thing that this, I'd have to see the idea of if you have a school district that's historically low performing, if you have a district that is really bad, that needs to be corrected, and I'm not saying it doesn't, and perhaps the state should jump into it and fix it, but how? If it's just to do mirror language around some of the other states that are using these other type of vehicles to correct local government, then I guess To me, it would make sense.
Basically, you're thinking the local or our existing DPI should be responding to that, and we shouldn't be
Yes.
setting up something new?
Yes.
Might I suggest, there are some models on school districts in the state of New Jersey that have been taken over by the state of New Jersey,
They-
and frankly, the outcomes are not, you bring in from somebody who's less responsive to the community, because they displace the school board, they displace the district administration, they basically try to start from scratch, and they may start from scratch by rehiring all new teachers. The reality is that the environment that usually leads to a school and at that level of utter failure is well outside the control of whoever is managing the school district. And the ability to effectively change, unless you're dealing with Geoffrey Canada's total package of that's being used in Harlem, is the Harlem Project, where you're dealing with the interventions in the family home, you're dealing with all of the pieces that effectively affect children's learning. There are not models, because if there was, you could hire the best wisdom to run and prevent a failing school, but if you cannot control the environment from which the children come from, the reality is that the likelihood of success is not there. I don't know that anybody wisdom coming out of Madison would necessarily be able to step in and run a school better, or hiring some expert across the country. And you also lose local control in that case, because they come in and I think the biggest single factor is the environment in the family home, of how well prepared children are to attend school. And that's going to make the big difference, and no change in management is going to change that outcome.
Just to clarify, while there is that corporate element, I think Mr. Dito referred to, that's a potential outcome, say in Michigan, I'm not familiar with that model. Wasn't there a push in Wisconsin, say 2-3 years back, with mayoral takeover of MPS, for example, under Tom Barrett?
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's not just, and I don't want to speak, but I think well-intended. I don't think there's some darker motivation for that.
And that is truly an Eastern model. Many Eastern school districts are subservient. In fact, up until, as I read the history of Oshkosh, up until about the 1950s, the school district of Oshkosh was subservient to the city of Oshkosh. That is a party to some governance structure that is not nearly the radical shift as to hiring a contract agency or for-profit or even non-profit agency to run the school district. That's a fairly common pattern I know in Massachusetts and in Connecticut, that there is a governance structure that is under the town council for the allocation of resources.
Well, I guess, all right, lastly, I guess the 14-12, the authority to establish school calendar. And the only reason I bring this one up is because, I guess I see some sense in having some statewide uniformity in a calendar. Basically, what they're saying here is the idea that each individual school district could decide their own calendar rather than have, which they do anyway, but it's it's in regard to start times. WASB supports the local school boards having sole authority to establish the school calendar and the number of contract days, and supports repealing existing state statutes restricting the school start date. I know the reason that we supposedly have the school start date is so that Door County doesn't lose all their kids right before the holiday weekend. But I guess I personally don't have a problem with the idea that there's at least a small amount of.
But don't you think that local communities should have a say? Let's say that
Something as small as the start date, we all, all.
well,
Wisconsin
it's a start
schools-
date and the school calendar and number of contract days.
But the number of, we already have those. They're basically, what they're saying is they support repealing the existing state statute restricting the school start date. That's the last part of the sentence.
Yeah, I understand. But why not just let the communities? I mean,
I guess I don't see a reason.
you don't, but what if somebody in Menasha does or somebody in Oconomowoc does? I mean,
Well, there's somebody at this table.
maybe somebody at this table does.
That's why if somebody at this table does, I'm probably not going to make much of a point of it.
Well, I guess I'm in agreement with Allison. I think the local control is important. What if the state all of a sudden decides to say that the school start date uniformity throughout the 424 districts is August 15th? I mean, many parts of our state are heavily agricultural, and you make hay when the sun is shining. I mean, that's why I believe that you should have that opportunity. Or if it's something like Door County, I believe that a day here or two or even 3 or 4, depending on how that local community deals with its economic structure, I think should be up to the local community.
Anyone else? Oh, sorry.
We have hundreds of students who really start their school year prior to whatever the existing date is in state law. They're called student athletes, the football players, the tennis players, the soccer players, who all start practice in early August. And parents say, their summer is effectively done because they have to be present for their children here in Oshkosh. So for high schoolers, which always seems somewhat contradictory to me because those are the ones most likely to be working in the various industries that are trying to preserve the holiday or the vacation schedule through Labor Day, and yet they're the ones who are the athletes who need to be back in their local communities. So I don't know. I mean, years ago, districts could set their dates pretty much the way they wanted, and they typically started here in this district the last full week in August. At least staff had to come back for part of that week, and students too, and then there would be some concerns raised about children whose parents were going to take that last week in August as vacation anyway, and so they weren't going to report until after September 1st, so it made it tricky at the school level to know, is Susie showing up this year, or did Barb transfer to another district? Because really you didn't know who was going to make up the majority of your classes until after Labor Day anyway.
And I guess if everybody's starting on a different date, you still end up with problems of who may or may not be in your district. If you stick to what we have now, basically, at least the starting, the rest of it, we still make up the calendar. We still determine, the number of contract days. But what we do as a state is we all decide that, okay, there's at least one date on the calendar that's the same, and it's the start date. Mr.
I might just point out that we have a certain group of students who we contract with a program at the Fox Valley Tech, and they start on or about the 20th of August every year, and we have contracted them for services for at-risk students for a good number of years under different contracts and names of the program. But we already have students who are fully engaged, a full 10 days or more before September 1st. And it works just fine.
I would just add on the caution because only a handful of our districts have temperature controls, the air conditioning. The issue really becomes one of in our early weeks of school, we regularly have parents wanting to approach us about putting in. I think I've had at least 7 or 8 proposals on persons wanting to come in and donate a window air conditioner for a classroom. Well, it kind of defeats our energy efficiency issues, and those are really not safety, nor are some of our buildings properly wired for handling those pieces. So there are some downsides, even for those first 3 or 4 weeks in September when we still have temperatures sometimes in the 85, 90 range. And for those school districts that have had the special authority to start early, and several of those I'm very familiar with, they ended up this year because of temperature, even though they were scheduled, they canceled school because of excessive heat. So we are somewhat subservient to Mother Nature regarding that issue as well. That is there, but I think the flexibility is there. is a good thing. However, frankly, we do end up having that only one uniform day that's a common calendar, as Matt suggests, for the year. That seems to work for most students and most families.
That was really it for, as I read through those items, I had questions on those three things. I wanted to know what the rest of the board thought. So,
What is your position then on Resolution 14.6, which would allow greater flexibility in terms of the numbers of days of instruction? This appears to give greater flexibility to districts to base instruction on hours of direct instruction rather than on days.
when I read that one, I actually, my first thought was, well, okay, if you cram in long hours in order to restrict the number of days, your kids probably aren't going to be learning as much.
We know that from these.
You know, I mean, if they're there from 6 in the morning until 10 o'clock at night, but they're only there for a limited number of days, they're probably not going to get the same education that they will if they're there from 9 to 3 and they're there a grade 6 days. So that was my own personal take
Okay,
on it.
I was just curious. Thank you.
So without regard, or I guess with the exception of me possibly striking or asking to strike the last line, it's the board's intent to vote in favor of all of these. All right, please call the roll.
Eliason?
Aye.
Eliason, aye. Garner?
Aye.
Garner, aye. Herzog?
Aye.
Herzog, aye. Lumberger?
Aye.
Lumberger, aye. Saginaw?
Aye.
Saginaw, aye. Wiedenhoff?
Aye.
Wiedenhoff, aye. Dito?
Aye.
Dito, aye. Motion carried.
Workshops. All right. Tonight we have the potential referendum determination of size. Sue Schnorr and executive team.
I would ask members of the executive team to step to the table. Sue and I partnered on trying to summarize some of the discussion from the last meeting and to give the Board of Education an opportunity to really have a starting point for the next discussion. We were kind of all over the place on both purpose and intent and length and size, and my goal was to at least put forth a administrative recommendation for you to consider as we approach this opportunity to raise additional funds. What I asked Sue to do initially was to make sure that we were, it goes back to my pure as the driven snow approach to life, is let's go back to exactly what the survey said was possible. We were off by $1, roughly at $1 million, but why not, it's kind of like in a marketing plan, a car looks a whole lot cheaper if it's $19,950 as opposed to $20,000. A referendum looks better, but we're also basing it on what the survey data said to us. Was that within that 4% margin of error that we were possible at $56 per $100,000 of value as a potential increase. I then took a look at the pieces that we had been talking about. Well, I should first of all say that then generates, instead of $4 million, and Sue asked me how many zeros did we want to put on the end of that line, but in numbers at a parity to the 56, that generates $3,950,000. The proposed one-to-one initiative that is the alternative that to deal with technology has a cost that's built in at $1.6 million additional. That is the consideration. The whole discussion of we have those. What color are we? We have them now, Dave? Pink. Those line items where, or whichever color in the strategic plan that indicate that in virtually every category we identify that there are some costs related to that. We know that the greatest amount of cost really falls under the area of Goal 5 that relates to new initiatives and the exploration, staff development to get STEM programming off the ground, to potentially deal with language immersion program, maybe IB programming, or some yet to be determined magnet focus, of which the biggest costs that relate to starting those programs is initial investment in staff training and equipment to have those in place, and that's an estimate. And I would believe that depending upon the time frame, if that were authorized, frankly, in the first year, we may not use $850,000, but over the average of a number of years to get those programs up and successfully running, it may take in that range. Recently, one of our principals attended a workshop on IB and came back with a whole set of basic startup numbers that folks in the state of Wisconsin have identified for startup for international baccalaureate program. Each of these have a cost. The biggest issue is really staff training and investment so that you launch the programs well. Secondly would be equipment. And to a certain extent, in some cases, it might be facilities modification. Again, each of those are one-time costs that relate to those. So I included that as a beginning number. And then looking at what several board members have said to me, I thought we were also looking at the referendum to stop some of the bleeding in the district and the annual reductions, and to deal with the issue of proposed funds to preserve existing program initiatives, and that's really offsetting to a certain extent the number of budget cuts. And later on, Sue will pass them out. I don't think you put them in the packet. They're here. I asked Sue to go back and say, let's go back to the $11 million list that had been generated in the past of what are we preserving. The other piece that our two student board representatives indicated that they were interested in our asking students, and I've asked administration of both schools, and they're working together on this project, is to, and they will have the data about the end of the first full week of January, is to survey students. And using number one issue that students are always, and we see this frequently even on our computer search engines based data, where you're going to discover what are the 10 worst cars you can buy, or what are the 10 best places to visit. Well, in a simplistic fashion of wanting to get from students, what are the top 10 items that you would want to absolutely preserve in your schools? Secondly, what 10 items might you identify as items that if there were choices and we could legitimately not do them, what should they also be? So we're going to have that added to the piece. But the goal here would be, and at your board work session on the 6th of January, would be, where's that, 6th or 8th of January, is, I should have it here, we just, is to present to you a process, once again, to do budget reconciliation, similar to what we did last year, only on a compressed timeline, to identify specifically what on that $11.5 million list should be there. We need to generate what are the trade-offs, what are we willing to continue to invest in, what are the potential things that we could live without. Remember very, very carefully the fact that this district has been trimming. Matt, you said you've been cutting, and John, every year since you've been on the board,
Yes.
$3 million a year. The low-hanging fruit that this district has cut away already is significant. That we do not run programs right now that do not enroll students. We do not run programs that don't have a certain level of subscribers to them. And we recognize that if we're going to try to balance what is available in this $3.95 million preservation effort in the district, and I view all of those as preservation. New initiatives is preservation of the district to further and improve the school district. Returning existing programs is preservation, and technology investment is certainly preservation of the district in creating a structure that allows us to adapt to a better future. All of those are critical pieces. And so as I contemplated this issue in the last 2 weeks since our last meeting, I really needed to kind of think through the process of saying, how do we come to some balance between all of these competing values? And there is no purity in this, but I wanted to provide for you a opportunity to kind of think about what's the beginning point, how far does this go, and how can we potentially have you as a board, and with the additional interesting input that I look forward to seeing from students, and then also relating to our community coalition, what would be the preserve of $1.5 million, and what would be still $1 million+ that would need to be cut, and what would we live without, and what are we prepared to do that? And I don't think there's, I know that my cabinet executive team is very much engaged in knowing and understanding the nuance of every piece of what every plus side of preserving something, and what are the downsides of everything we potentially cut, and making sure that we make the best possible decision that becomes effectively a tool that the community can understand, that why are we trying to hold on to what we have. But we also have to carefully approach this in the fact that whatever gets on that $2.5 million list, if the worst scenario happened and we lost this election opportunity, that we have to be prepared and structure things so we do not design things that we really can't live with, or violate the law, or create an environment that is not sustainable, because that's a betrayal of the public trust also. And having been a party to this a number of times in my career, I take that role and function very seriously, in the fact that what we have to come up with, and what a citizens committee that will need to complete its work for you pretty close to the first week or so of February, because I hope to be able to have a list to you for your board work session on the first meeting of February, and for you to have to act on what the real cuts are, so that they're part of the full knowledge for at least 30+ days before the election. What are the downsides? We have to take this job very, very seriously and very intensely. So with that, I will stop the introduction. I asked Sue today just to make sure that we have, so that you know what that terrible list looks like. As a reminder, it's simply been the work of the past that's been put together. We've not adjusted and augmented it, but we wanted to make sure that as you look at what we didn't get to last time, is still out there. There are no good things on this list. The things we can live without very well have disappeared a long time ago. And these are the whole parts and pieces that are there, and some of those we fully know, but it's a laundry list of pain, actually. So with that, I turn the discussion over to any members of executive team that would like to augment or supplement any piece that I've tried to cover in introductory comments. Dave or anyone tried to. And in knowing full well, we do have the opportunity one more time after a 3-week break here, that on the 8th of January, we have scheduled a continuation of this work session. So answering every question tonight. If you give us questions, we'll research them, but we'll be prepared to respond to additional questions by the 8th of January. Barb.
Let me start with what I think is a simple question of a complex topic. Under 3E, under major points in the report, The last item, proposed funds to preserve existing quality initiatives. I'm looking for an operational definition of quality initiatives. Is that based on the work of people like David Langford and Deming, or is that something that should really be a small Q? It's not quite,
Probably should be a small.
okay. So it's not part of the,
Right.
the quality work done by Langford, Deming, others. Okay, thank you.
$289,000 we're supposed to be saving off of reduced purchase services. Where are we at with that? Do we have any idea what the running total is? Are we saving anything on that?
I did send that out to you. We did end up cutting that back. It's a hard number because it's distributed over like all these different budget areas, and it varies from year to year depending upon what the needs are. And in some situations, we actually save money by having a purchase service.
Right.
So I think it's I shared with you maybe a couple months ago what all the breakdown of all those 310s were, but I don't really see that as a savings area, just for those reasons, because there's not one big lump sum chunk of money in one place, and that number varies depending upon what the needs are in the district. And again, sometimes we spend that money to save money.
No, I understand. I guess my question, Sue, is it, if we don't know, I mean, we based our budget for this coming year off that $289,000 reduction, I believe. That was part of our overall.
Right, that was on the list, but it really wasn't, we didn't really reduce purchase services anywhere by that amount.
Okay.
I mean, purchase services were reduced over the previous year, but not specifically by that amount. I think it was down by like 113.
Okay.
I
Okay.
should probably put
Maybe
that
when we
in
come up to the
the
budget records.
that we did reduce purchase services, but not by that full 289.
Okay. Maybe when we come up to the actual budget reconciliation, we can have some sort of, I don't know, attainable, quantifiable, trackable data number.
I think 289, if my memory is right, was just a percentage.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay, so just like a,
Flat percentage at that time.
okay, so it wasn't,
Like 10%?
it wasn't
whatever.
specific, like, we're gonna pick off these 10 things and that's worth 289. It was,
Correct.
I can see that because it's a big number. When you look at the total 310, it's a big number, but when you really break down the detail, it's
Right.
spread over a lot of.
sure, yeah, understood.
I know that last time we were here, I mentioned, we're doing this to basically to preserve what we have, and how can we offer the community something worthwhile, rather than telling them, well, if you want to maintain what we have, this is what you have to do. Is there something else that we can do instead? And I guess at the same time, when I'm looking at this, my first thought is, unfortunately, in a polar opposite direction of, okay, if we've got $1,500,000 each year for the next 7 years, that still means that we're cutting $1 million a year every year for the next 7 years, which is still an incredibly daunting task. Now, obviously, we've been cutting for the last 5 years, and out of several of those years, out of 5, we've had 3 years of budget surpluses. So I guess I'm wondering, where do you anticipate? I see letter A on here, which says it's anticipated that 2015 is still going to be $2.5 million. Are you still projecting that, or do you think that the projections that we've had have been an error? Do you foresee that the $1.5 million is going to end up covering us over some of those 7 years, or that something's going to change in that regard?
I feel pretty comfortable with the $2.5 million number that I projected. I think the reason you have a surplus is due to a number of things. I haven't looked into it real closely yet, but one of them is I think the PMA model, even though it's a good model for forecasting, I think it's an ultra-conservative model. So I think in the past you've probably cut more than you have to based on that model, and I don't mean to bash that model by any means. It's a good planning tool, but I think it leans incredibly conservative.
Right. Well, I mean, one of those years we sold a school for a couple $1 million,
Right.
and obviously that causes surplus. But other than that, well, we've had some other things too, I guess, some cost savings that have come up that weren't necessarily an extraction from the district. But so if we really think that we're going to be in need of cutting $2,500,000 every year, I guess I am. That's still troubling to me that we would go to referendum and say,
And cover those costs.
you know, we for 7 years we're going to ask for $3,950,000, but we're still going to end up cutting $1 million a year. I don't know how you'd sell that to anybody.
And the issue that we're dealing with here is
At the same time,
at the same time,
last week I was here, or 2 weeks ago I was here saying, well, you know, we've got to be able to offer a modicum of change for this proposal.
If we're going to have this call to question potentially on the 8th of January, is there a way that we can get some specificity on where did we come up with the surplus that we have? I mean, obviously, some of it was retirement of experienced educators, the hiring of new educators. Some of it was, I believe, $800,000 savings in energy. Some of it was the 1.7 or whatever on the sale of Lincoln. Can we actually get some specificity and see, is it going to be, I understand what you're saying about the PMA model, and I felt that way too. I believe that it is it's ultra-conservative in its forecasting. I guess I would just like to know that as well, because I appreciate what Matt is saying.
Sure, I can break out why you had such a surplus this last year, maybe even look back a little bit.
Because, I mean, if we keep predicting that we're going to have this, but then we have the surplus, obviously
It's like crying wolf, you're right.
yes.
I agree. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Though you have to also keep in mind that we're like a $140 million budget. $3 million is only 2%.
Right, understood.
You know, so I know $3 million sounds like a huge, huge number, but it's only 2% of your whole budget. If you look at your own household income, now granted it's not a good comparison, you know, if you're off by 2% on your household income and in your budget at home, it's not that big of a deal. So you kind of have to keep it in perspective. But I do agree that $3 million is a little bit too high.
And having a surplus, obviously, is always preferable to having a deficit at the end of every year. That just makes things worse.
Exactly.
John?
Yeah, I mean, I hate to open this can of worms, but I have to. You know, we're projecting this structural budget deficit of, you know, whatever it is, 2.5, whatever. How much of that is due to increasing health insurance costs?
About half of it.
Yeah.
What I did is I took a look at all the salaries and fringes and gave them a 2% increase. Now I know the CPI is about 1.7, but I took the fact that, you know, 2% is easy. And then the other half of that's about half of the 2.5, and the other half is you are probably going to have a 10% health insurance increase in January. We did a bid out this last year, and we have a 10% rate guarantee this next year. So about half of that is.
So if I remember right, I think our annual health insurance premium is about $20 million. Is that right? And 10% of that is $2 million then. So we're kind of looking at a $2 million jump every year. I mean, this is the thing that really kind of, as I've been on the board now almost 6 years, and I just watched this just eat our budget up.
Yeah. It's the reason we cannot balance. This is the deficit.
Yeah.
This is
And
what causes our deficit every year.
Not wanting to micromanage, but you know, I'm looking at your proposed referendum or referenda proposals here. Would it make sense to have one that just addresses that health insurance increase so that when voters go to the polls, they know, okay, you know, this is what the district sees every year as an annual increase, and so for the next 5 or 7 years, we're going to give you the money to cover that. So because it's just like eating our budget up.
I hate to see it as a referendum question. I don't think that's a really good idea.
Okay.
But I think the district is looking at ways to get a handle on it. I mean, we've talked to you about doing an on-sign clinic Other districts have found that having an on-site clinic does save them money. We're looking at implementing that possibly with the city and the county over the course of this next year. We've been talking a lot with OEA about getting the message back out to employees as to better consumers of your health care. So there's things we can do to manage those costs.
Yeah, I know.
But I don't really think making it part of the referendum question is
We've been struggling with this forever.
When it's
And
double-digit
I
increases,
really-
I'm not sure it matters.
Yeah, but I really think that people need to understand, it's not that we are, spending wildly or mismanaging the budget
No.
or anything like that. This is something we have tried, we've struggled with, we've changed, health insurance providers, we've looked at different options, we've brought in consultants, but no matter what we do, it seems like that 10% on 20 million every year is there biting us and eating away at our budget. And I think that it's really important for the community to understand that's where a big part of our structural budget deficit is at. And it has nothing to do with, greedy teachers and, all the kind of stuff that certain people like to throw around out there and we talk at restaurants and all that kind of stuff. So, how do we get that message out there? That we're being very responsible here, but we're in a no-win situation. And I understand why. I guess I kind of understand why it's not a good idea to put as a referendum question. But that was just my idea of how we advertise that. And
right. I think as part of our advertising and getting information out, we can show that we've bid it out. We can show that our employees are paying more. We can show that we've increased deductibles. I think all of those things are really good PR type things that we should be putting out there when we start putting out material. If we do go to a referendum, we're going to have to put out a lot of information and facts, and that could be a very good section of what we put out.
There should also be energy consumption too as well. The city just raised our rates too on water. It was like, 100% or something over the next couple of years. I mean, all those things that make it impossible. Even if you had the state exact same funding that you had 2 years ago, you're still going to be underwater in 3 years' time. I guess I would agree. I don't think it's a good idea of having it actually placed at a referendum question. One thing I like what you've got here about proposed strategic magnet schools. Is it your intention then to have 3 questions?
No, I would suggest with this small amount, I would suggest one question. Otherwise, you are basically allowing for a throwaway item. I would suggest that it would be one ballot question.
Okay. If I might suggest then, if we have one question, I did kind of like the way that Appleton had broke down theirs. They were asking for $30 million, but they had it parceled out in technology. $6 million to STEM, which would of course equate to our strategic plan magnet school situation. They've got stuff in there for space additions, which would be remodeling, safety, energy efficiency, all these tech replacements, professional development. My point is that last line, proposed funds to preserve existing quality initiatives, kind of like what Barb was talking about here. Is there a better? It's got to have rhythm, and it doesn't have rhythm right now.
Well, the other thing, Steve, and I agree with you on that, but it's if we have the structural budget deficit of coming from health insurance of $2 million a year, and this is 1.5, we're not adequately addressing it. Then we're still always going to have to come back and cut something. And Mr. Mack made a really great point. We've already cut everything that we can cut. So I'm saying, I guess it's not adequate then. 1.5.
I totally agree. The issue is we're struggling here with living within the parameters of what the community said was the bite-sized bit that they would accept. They would consider that more than 50% of individuals. We are dealing with an issue that is 22 years old, since 1992, of underfunding the district. If we do not tackle the first bite-sized bit first, and then, frankly, I will say this, that the reality is that 3 years from now, we need to, in addition, look at another bite-sized bit to get us to that level. And, Sue, I'm not sure if you had a chance to look at, last year Bob Test ran some numbers that basically show what would get us to the average of our comparable districts. well, that's not affordable in the community today in the mindset that guarantees, even $5 million said we had 22% support for that. We're not, if we had an increase of $5 million. The reality is that we could use $7, $8, $9 million and get us to where our comparable districts who have adequately funded their schools for the last 20 years. And so we are struggling with the fact that we have to be brave to take the first bite-sized bit and recognize that this is not the solution, but it is a step towards the solution. And we have to be, and I'm fanatical about the issue, and having worked with Springstead Studies before, that we are utter fools to ignore the advice of consultants to try to fix this in one fell swoop, or even half the step in one fell swoop. We need to honor what the community told us, but recognizing that this is no way the solution. This is a step towards resolving what is a 22-year-old underfunding of the school district. And for us to look at the horizon and saying, well, why not 3 years from now? Why aren't we out of this hole? Well, we didn't get in this hole in 3 years. We got in this hole in 22 years.
And I'm not suggesting at all that we go over that $56. As a matter of fact, I think that's pretty liberal itself. But what I guess I'm asking is, okay, give us the rationale for how you distributed that.
Right.
Because you've got, 3 things on there, and the biggest one is the technology initiative. Why there instead of going down to the third one and covering that structural deficit and then maybe spreading out the technology thing a little more? That's all I'm asking.
Right. And I use that because that was the most solid number that we have as a result of the extensive study and work that was done by the Technology Committee to get us into a position to honor and, I believe, generate additional both enrollment, students, and become more cost efficient in the long run by using technology. I think that has a good return on investment. Using the greater amount of dollars for offsetting budget reductions is simply putting more money into the system that doesn't gain us anything other than kind of hold the water. It's the proverbial Dutch boy holding the finger in the dam. We know that we don't have enough fingers to keep all those leaks going. And so.
Allison, you wanted to say something.
No, I didn't. No, I think he's.
Well, I was going to say that, John, we said at the last meeting that we don't want to really just ask for more money to continue on with how we've been doing things. When I saw this breakdown come through the agenda packet, I was very pleased in that it's got 2.4 versus 1.5 in new initiatives, because we have said now, and it came from her originally, I believe, that we can't cut our way out of this. We've got to grow our way out. And I see, and reiterating what Dr. Mack said here about how that the one-on-one technology, if we're going to get student engagement, if we're going to be competitive, if we're going to have those opportunities on increased efficiency and all these other things, and then the exploration of magnet schools, STEM technology, which we have talked about for years now, those would be things which would actually contribute to bringing people into the district, which would stop the flow of the exodus, which is beginning to happen on our students, attendance. And I think that it's like an investment, and it's like a cash injection for an investment. And I think that as a business, if you've got stuff that, if you got a core product and you're selling your core product and it's selling well, you've got, like, say, Oaks Candy, and their peanut clusters are just always selling. You always get peanut clusters that sell. But in there, you've got some other things that are not selling so well. That's what we have been perhaps eliminating classes that have not had high attendance and this stuff over the last few years. Every once in a while, Oaks needs to sit there and invest in some kind of new thing, like chocolate-covered gummy bears or something where I know, but my kids love them. That this is something new and radical, but it becomes accepted, it becomes popular, and I think that's what we need to do with this as well, is that we invest these. I see that 2.4 as a real investment, not just maintenance. This last line, you could just put it, as far as I'm concerned, maintenance, because that's what we're doing. We're just maintaining what we have, or try to.
I tried to structure it of 2/3 investing in our future and 1/3 hoping that we don't have continued, that we try to hold on to what we have. Because a full-scale $2.5 million cut will erode again the confidence and trust of our families and community who are really dedicated to our schools. And that's where we have to build for our future. And the first two line items are really a building for the future, and the last one is trying to retain the trust and confidence of the existing community that frankly likes what we're doing, and they like what their children are receiving. And that to me is kind of the balance. In the meantime, yeah, it would be nice if the community would have told us that we could do more and we could really offset the budget cut into the future for 2 or 3 years, and until we demonstrate our good fiduciary sense, but also our good program delivery sense, that at the same time really buy us some time to restore and build the trust and confidence of the community. For the last 18 months, I viewed this as I came into the district as an essential issue of building and reacquainting the school district with the community and building a trust relationship. And to this team that's here is doing that. I'm doing that every day in trying to build that relationship with the community. And what we have to do right now is do remind ourselves that you are 7 board members at the table today trying to counteract what 22 years of history has done to us. And you cannot do it, we cannot do it, but we can do it in bite-sized bits that will help, that give us the opportunity, community, to do this, that we then need to restore and trust and say, look at the things that we can do. The first 2 items will generate new enrollment in the district. The other, the last item will hold the enrollment we have.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and that's really the issue at hand, because we've got to look at it from that perspective. And you know, I would wish that we could be halfway to that $8 or $9 million real deficit that we're undercapitalized at. But if we only have roughly 40% of that or 30% of that, well, then we have to make the most of the 30% we have, and then try to do that and try to turn that around in that way. So as I developed those numbers, I looked at it from the standpoint, and I've been through this before in trying to restore, and I see those pieces being essential, that you have to plan for the future. It's like a corporation that would fail to deal with research and development and only sell that product that's going out of style, and put all the money into it, and then hope that they can sell the company before it fully went out of style.
And all around us are districts that are doing like Appleton,
right.
Green Bay, I believe Fond du Lac is, and I mean, so we're not the only one that are trying to do a referendum here. I did notice on the referendum questions from around the area that some of them have it just real cut and dried operational referendum, not really broke down. It's essentially talking about sustaining what they have, and I will be interested to see after April 1st if those pass, because to me, when I look at Appleton or Green Bay or some of the other districts that are also asking for referendum dollars, it's the great majority of them are looking at investing, you know, and I think I think we're wise to place the question in that aspect.
The piece, as I struggled with this, and I frankly have been struggling with this, once I knew the final number, I had a scenario worked out. I was thinking that subtracting $1 might, from 57 to 56, and living within that, I had a lower number that I had to work with. Well, it was a whole lot more fun when Sue came back with $3,950,000 that I could expand because I had proportionally drawn these numbers at a lower level until Sue was able to calculate the pieces. But knowing full well, proportionally, I still had the same range. I had a lower number for retention of programs, and I had comparable numbers for both holding on, and I always held on to the $1.6 million because our investment there is a critical one to building our future.
And this still incorporates the 1.3, correct? It's an extension of what, the 2009 referendum?
Well, actually, that comes off. So
Right, but I mean, it's being,
It's being replaced, yeah. So what that referendum came on, that $1.3 million coming off, effectively gave us the ability to really fully utilize what the community said at $56. If that wasn't coming off, we wouldn't be able to move at that level.
Right.
This is obviously a very complex issue, and I'm trying to look at this from a big picture framework rather than separating forest and trees. So there are a number of variables, I think, that need to be factored in at some point. We've been talking, we've been talking about a deficit for the 14-15 school year. We haven't talked about any proposed deficits beyond that, so at some point that needs to weigh into the conversation. Secondly, I know I've been involved in a couple of meetings where there have been conversations about TIF money coming into the district, and I don't know that we've really had a comprehensive conversation about how much money we're talking about and where that money might be utilized. Thirdly, I know it came up again at tonight's meeting. There's interest, or has been interest, in the Lakeside Green Meadow community to restore that attendance area, namely now the Lakeside location, to a K-5 site. And I don't believe there's sufficient classroom space currently to allow that to happen, so that's another variable. Another variable would be the strategic goals in the Oshkosh for Education group. When those were presented to the community in terms of the progress being made on them in September, it seemed to me that every one of them carried a dollar figure for implementation. And we haven't really talked about how those might be funded, if a referendum was intended or not. Another variable, and it just came up, would be the maintenance budget. There's been a flurry of activity, as I would characterize it, over the last 3 or 4 years in terms of maintenance in this district, and yet, even though the $1.3 million is ending, I don't think the projects are ending or the needs are ending. And having been, as Allison pointed out, in the Webster Auditorium recently, and they're looking at approximately $140,000 to restore that to its 1955 look. I just have a real hard time with the school community being asked to renovate what to me is a classroom space. That's a learning environment. We don't ask them to revise the first grade classroom in a particular school or the science lab in a high school. I really don't think it's fair to ask the Webster middle school community to come up with $140,000 no matter how they do that. I was just at the North High choir concert last night, which was wonderful. Boxes were passed. People were asked to donate their spare change because the choir garb that has been worn by decades of students, I think they're the original dresses that were purchased in 1972.
They look like them, too.
And they look like them. I have not seen women wear dresses with cowl necklines for several decades. And I don't even see them in the vintage clothing shops. So, but I'm thinking maybe a fundraiser could be selling those dresses. Somebody might want those. But
and you can extend that to the orchestra and band. I mean,
yes,
the
you can.
Instruments that we have for orchestra.
The sound system at Traeger.
Right.
Sound
They're
system at
raising
Traeger.
money
They
for
were
that.
passing the hat last night selling ice cream. the backboards for the South Park Middle School gym. So there are lots of what seem like small projects, but if they're in your school, they're not small projects. Teacher salaries have been frozen for more than 1 year in this district. We're seeing teachers leave for other districts and in some cases getting sizable raises. We've fallen behind as a district in terms of the starting salary for teachers. In looking at some of the support staff, it truly bothers me that we have people who are not receiving a living wage. And we're a professional learning organization, and I have a real hard time with that. Dedicated professionals who work with some of the most challenging students in our district on a daily basis, doing tasks that many people would not find that they would care to do. And yet these are dedicated people who return year after year to those same positions, to those same teaching and learning situations, and they don't earn a living wage to support their families. They have to have a second income. They're selling plasma to the plasma center. I wrestle with that. The magnet schools and their costs. Driving over here tonight, I heard that the state is looking at changing the rules again for charter schools, and they're going to call them magnet schools. I thought that was interesting. They're going to allow them to operate outside of school districts. That is, under the jurisdiction of school districts. They won't have to be instrumentalities of school districts anymore like they now typically are. For the last, I'm guessing, 5 or 6 years, the charter school movement has provided a flat amount of money. Didn't matter how big your charter school was. It didn't matter what your district's budget was. It didn't matter. You got the same flat amount. A tube sock mentality, same size fits all. You got $150,000, whether you were having a school of 400 plus in Waukesha in a STEM school, or you had an environmentally charged school over in somewhere in the Wisconsin Rapids area. So I'm not really sure how to factor in what a magnet school, as we're looking at them, would define them. I agree with Mr. Mack, there must be some startup costs. But I'm not sure how we put a number on that, and if we define that as it's presented here, I think the intent is multiple schools, but I'm not even sure of that. Are we looking at multiple schools? Are we looking at one school? It's very hard. I think that would be very difficult when you look at as we did tonight, the carryover money for the various schools, and you look at the total school budgets of some of those schools and what they're trying to run with. Just taking Jacob Shapiro as an example. Jacob Shapiro Brain-Based Instruction Laboratory School, it has been a charter school, and the charter money runs out, or has run out, after 5 years. So their ability to continue to train new staff, their ability to use the materials that form the basis of the brain-based instruction, for which they've been able to demonstrate statistically significant gains in student learning, is now on them to do. As far as I can tell, they've not received a bump in their dollar amount over previous years, but they just have to figure out how to pay for that out of their existing budget. So to give a magnet school perhaps tens of thousands of dollars when you're trying to sustain an existing program that's demonstrated its viability, I think could cause some ill will between schools. So I just see this as very complex with lots of issues. I also understand that there needs to be a citizen committee that would actually lead the charge on this. I don't know if any group or individuals have been calling up or dialing in the email to say, sign me up, I want to help lead the charge on this. But And all of this, in my estimation, is in a very tight timeline. The April election is as early as it could possibly be, April 1st. So there's a lot of work to be done between now and when a board vote would be taken and when a vote would be asked for by the citizens. I didn't mean to.
Dr.
overwhelm.
Herzog, your laundry list is the ones that one that keeps me up at night.
Okay.
I know that.
Don't call me in the middle of the night.
Don't call. But
If you keep the referendum questions fairly vague, you
Okay.
can set it very specific. The 800,000 or whatever Mr. Mack proposed. Right this in 14-15, you could allocate over time. I mean, you could use the whole 2.5 just to keep existing programs the first year, and then over time, as you start researching what those magnet schools would be or what those new and existing programs would be, as long as you keep your referendum question relatively vague, you have the flexibility within whatever the amount is to go towards different initiatives.
yeah, the ballot
helpful.
question.
Thank
The
you.
ballot question is very prescribed by law as to what it says, but and what must be contained in it. What the district communicates as the reason for the need, why the ask, is clearly pieces that I've outlined here and with more detail. And thirdly, the selling, as you're very correct, there are individuals in the community who are just waiting for the opportunity to
Okay,
step
great.
forward, and they're hoping to immediately upon board action on this and to move ahead with the process. The district has a whole set of public communication items that they need to do that objectively lays out our economic history, what has occurred, what are the expectations of how we would use the funds in the future, and what we also have to be very clear on is, and it just surfaced, it surfaced with the Government Relations Committee of the Chamber of Commerce. It surfaced yesterday morning at the Oshkosh for Education discussions with their quarterly meeting with us. And in each case, there are individuals there who rightfully are asking the question that I think Matt and John have raised, is saying, but does this fix it forever? No, again, it only takes a bit of the recovery of 22 years of underfunding and to deal with this, and that is really the first incremental step of tackling this issue, because we can sit on our hands. And Matt said to me yesterday, he said, "Well, you have said continuously we need a referendum." And frankly, I'm still walking around yet. So that's it. It must be okay, because people kind of expect us to take care of the district and to create a future that is better than the present. Mm-hmm. And that is what I view is the absolute mission that you as a board members have, and that we as an administrative team need to make our future better than what the most recent past has been, but frankly what the 22-year history since the district was locked into a lower per pupil unit expenditure back in 1992.
But it's not just the 22 years, Stan, at least not in my opinion. It's what John was alluding to as well. Mm-hmm. Yes, this district certainly has a history of underfunding. But every year when you've got a structural deficit because health insurance, and it's not just obviously the school district, it's quite frankly our entire country, it's every business, it's every family who has health insurance is really getting dragged through the coals by this industry. But I mean, that's a big part of our, so even if we had funded it like Nina or Menasha or Fond du Lac, they're still having referendums too.
And they're seeing double-digit growth, right?
Yes.
Just like the rest of us.
Yes, and they're seeing the same double-digit growth in that, and it's, you're right. I'll just stop. We'll continue on forever on this. The one point I did want to make on this is when we get these people together, and then we're going to get tasks for every board member to find 5 people, and you guys down there, some of you need to find 5 people because last year I found 7.
That's because of where you hang out.
Well,
not going to get into where
But-
people spend their time.
But that committee came back, and in their summary, their recommendation was, they actually were, quite frankly, why aren't you guys going to referendum right now?
Yeah.
And that was their recommendation last year. And we tried to keep, as you guys went through the budget reconciliation, we tried to stay true to what that committee did.
And the community survey confirmed what this,
It
what
kind-
that committee
It kind of
had
did.
said.
Yep,
So-
I agree. So I think we need to stay upfront with the community about what's going on here with this stuff.
And I guess it is, in terms of being upfront, I had a gentleman come up to me yesterday and talk to me about the fact that the 1.3 million for capital improvements is dropping off, and have we figured out a way to put that into our budget so that we can continue to do that within our budget? And I said, no, we have not. The 1.3 is dropping off, and those are capital improvements that are just going to stop. By that same token, when I look at this list, and I look at this list, and I think, okay, we're going to go to referendum. We're still going to figure out some way to cut $1 million every year. And I look at this list. I don't see the million that anybody's going to want to cut off of this list.
Right. It's so painful.
And obviously, I guess what I'm saying is, you can take it, Barb, you had a nice lengthy list of all the areas,
Thank you.
and it doesn't stop there.
Oh, no. No.
But in this particular one, we're not going for capital improvements. We're not going for complete resolution of our structural deficit. We're going for a portion of it, and we're probably going to have issues with capital needs, and we're probably going to have issues with what's going to come off this list.
Sure.
And that is extremely troubling. I'm not sure how to get us out of that.
One of the things I would remind the board of, and when I early on we began debating in the summer, you had done some preliminary work, and I think Matt, your professional expertise and background related to the whole issue of taking advantage of the boiler replacement, the new funding available,
The
that's
energy
available,
efficiency.
energy efficiency piece, that I remember in July and August the great trepidation that was the discussion of, could we do this, should we do this? We cut $500,000 off of the list to not balance and correct the heat in this building because we're going to only do it in instruction. And we did that, and the community did not object. They accepted that as being a good thing to do because and I had discussions with individuals who said, what if the boilers failed at West High School and they were all built with the original building, and where would we educate students for the rest of the year if the heating system went out? Well, people understand those investments. You passed that. You took action with it. We had nobody raised. You held public hearings on the issue. Nobody came and raised objection to the issue. You took the action. Again, in parallel activity, we have to do those kind of things on an ongoing basis as well, because this coming summer we will have consumed the 100% of that $22.5 million. We need to generate another list. We, in the fall of, in the summer of 2015, we may be in the position where we need to do the next part of the list. But we have to be brave enough and strong enough and have the facts to justify this is, again, an investment in our future, as opposed to sitting on our hands and say, woe unto us. Because we don't get anywhere with sitting woe unto us. And that to me is a critical piece that we need to deal with.
And
So.
Barb, to answer your other question about tax increment financing, the districts, this year we had tax increment district number 6 close out, and we received
It's $311,000.
check for $311,000.
Okay.
These are one time, they're not
Right.
recurring, so
Right.
these aren't things that you want to try and build into a
Sure.
budget. But as far as
One-time costs.
one-time costs, right, they're there. So that one was this year. Next year, we're looking at roughly a third of TID 8 most likely closing out. And that would be a third of 2.5 million, or roughly, 800, 900,000, 850,000, I guess, 833,000.
Stop it.
And then TID number 9 is obviously, things can change, but the way that the
City manager.
city is seeing it right now, TID number 9 would most likely be closing out in 2015, and that would be a third of 3.3 million, roughly a third, which would be about 1.1 million. And then there's also then we skip a year, and then they're probably looking at closing out another TID in 2017. We don't know. That's been a donor TID several times. We're not really sure what we're looking at in that one. And then we move on out to some other TIDs in like 2033.
We probably won't all be here then.
Right.
Thank you. That information is helpful.
We will be discussing that first one too, I guess, at Facility and Finance.
Okay.
I think Susan will be bringing it.
Good.
To make a valid point about the future too, the year 14-15 is the second year of a state biennium, so we know exactly what our funding is. But as you know how volatile it's been, I mean, the revenue limit used to go up by the CPI every year, and it was very predictable. But then the one year where we were having a negative 500, and then it was 0, and then this year 150. So who knows what 15-16 is going to be? I mean, they could knock us back down to 0 again, and then 2.5 now turns back into 3.5 or 4.
Right.
So it's so hard to predict what the next state biennium is going to be. So the 2.5 million is really just for 14-15, and if the state keeps funding us at about $150 per pupil, we can look at about $2.5 million a year. But if that changes up or down, that changes the amount of the deficit.
Right.
Thank you.
There's another piece that we certainly will be continuing to pursue, is the whole issue of retaining in recovery of the $1 million that we pay out to neighboring districts for open enrollment. Those are another piece of the equation and pie that is critical for us to turn around. But lines 1 and 2 on this proposed referendum is part of the key to that puzzle.
Yep.
We need to have the options that create the attractiveness to be competitive with our neighbors, and to create an environment that individuals would not look at enrolling their children in different locations. So,
Thank you.
members of the board, and I would just suggest that we've kind of posed at this point in time a whole lot of issues for you to contemplate and think about. Additionally, my intent only tonight was to kind of spell out a starting point for you to reflect upon. We will be busy working through this process and coming back for further discussion on the 8th of January. And I did tentatively, as I met with Matt and Steve this evening in preparing the outline of the agenda for really 3 weeks from now, because of holiday issues in between, that we tentatively put on both a discussion of workshop on this topic for that evening, but also a potential vote. And the contingency there is Director Saganak's being available for a vote later in the month, and we don't know exactly that is. So once we know that, but we want to make sure that we have the board together on this topic as we proceed with it. And we can certainly delay that if Kelly's
If I
Kelly's
leave,
avail-
I'm back on the 19th.
Okay, so
it's,
we just
it's good.
it's
all
good. So we can, I forget which day of the week the 19th is, but
Sunday.
Sunday?
Because 20th is a Monday.
20th is a Monday. We would just need to confirm, and Sue talked to legal counsel yesterday or today to confirm that if we would have the final legitimate language of the ballot question set to go, passage on the 20th is legal and appropriate, and so that could be the time that if that works. Bearing in mind that delays what Dr. Herzog was talking about earlier, was the getting rolling with the Citizens Committee action that needs to really effectively market it. It's something for you to contemplate and think about. We'll be back together again on Wednesday, the 8th of January, for us, but I think we've covered as much as we necessarily need tonight.
And currently, on the 8th, that would be the last discussion that we have on this topic, and then we could potentially vote on the 8th. So if there's something, if there's something big and major that you want this team to do or to bring back information on, speak now, because the meeting on the 8th could very well be the last.
I think it would be helpful to know about that overage that we have, and to be able to look at that and even project that. I think that could be helpful.
And I think if we could break down those costs, I really believe that the community needs and requires and will support us, but they've got to have all the information. So as it stands right now, I don't think we can just say it's these 3 amounts and we got to have it. We have to list what exactly they're going to be used for. How do we get to 850? How do we get to 1.5? So, but it sounds like you guys are heading that way anyway. So.
Right. Yeah, we are encouraging. We're going to be kind of scattered. I've said to the executive team that after with holidays in between, we're trying to have everybody try to get some rest and a little relaxation, because from January 2nd through April 1st, it will be nonstop.
Yes.
And so we will be very busy and very engaged.
Okay.
Anything else on this topic this evening, or anything that anyone wants to see? I'll start with Barb.
Thank you. The one thing that gnaws at me a little bit about this proposal is the 7-year duration. I don't know if it's a 7-year itch, but I don't know what other districts do as far as these kind of referenda for operation, if that's a common number or not. I think in the past, at least in this district, the duration has typically been around 5 years, unless it's been a capital improvement project, particularly a new building. 7 years to me sounds like a long time, especially in view of some of the other things that we've talked about, which could lead to another referendum, like a Lakeside Green Meadow building potentially, or implementation of some of the strategic goals from Oshkosh for education. So and waiting 7 years for a referendum that would support maintenance, and maybe that isn't the intent. If the intent is to go out in another 2 years and ask, and we're still paying off the last 5 years of this, but I'm not sure what the right duration is. Obviously, we have needs, and we're trying to make up for 22 years of underfunding, but I just don't know how 7 years will be perceived in the community as appropriate.
Yeah, I think it's a judgment call, but I suggested 7 years so that there is a chance to wait 3 to 4 for a stacking referendum.
Okay.
And otherwise, you're then right away back for renewing this one a year later. And you need to keep that. We're in a healthy place. It's a full 2 calendar years from the passage of the Oaklawn referendum. Okay. But last year, even if the opportunity would have presented itself and we would have been ready to go, we would have had a strategic plan, it would have been far too early 1 year later to try to market to the community a referendum 1 year after we just passed. My experience always tells me to create three to 4 year spaces, and the way you get a space is you have a 7 year margin. That's the rationale behind it. I know it's a judgment call, but in order to have the outcomes that you need, because of this not being the solo resolution to the problem, that's why I suggested that. It will be clearly a board decision, but the rationale behind that is really to create the spaces that we need to deliver on the product, but also to avoid voter fatigue.
Okay. Thank you.
Can I provide one clarification? When we're talking about the strategic plan and the strategic goals, it's the strategic plan is the Oshkosh Area School District's strategic plan and goals, and O for E, or Oshkosh for Education, is there to support us and to monitor and provide us feedback. But the strategic plan and the strategic goals are ours. And so I think sometimes there's a confusion out in the community that this is the Oshkosh for Education strategic plan. It's our strategic plan, and these are our goals. So I just wanted to clarify that.
So we don't have double set, we just have
Correct.
one set.
We have one set, yep.
And we thank them for helping us fund it.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Mhm.
Definitely.
Steve?
Stan, did you want us to have as board members 5
Yes.
on January 8th?
I don't need them by January 8th, but I would need them by within 2 weeks thereafter. And if it takes, Sherry has already asked me, when do we send out? I said, until we have more defined directions on the board, because I want to spell out in the letter what the task will be. And but if you as a board would consider having 5 names by the 8th of January, we will have a running start on that committee organization. And if you could identify individuals that last year, there are people in the community that served last year who I think are willing to do it again. Okay. So if you tap some of those folks, they were very, and there are some who I think would choose never wanting to do it again. But we had you did a wonderful job last year in putting together a very thoughtful group of individuals. We will also be soliciting from teacher leadership what the teacher involvement, principal involvement. So we will have all the counterparts. We'll take care of those internally with process, but the community being represented is a critical piece. And if you can identify those folks, come with names by the 8th of January, that would be very helpful.
Anyone else? All right. Thank you very much. This has been lively. Request for future agenda items. Has anyone got anything they want added to our list of future agenda items this evening? No? All right. Announcements? Mr. Mack?
Yes, I would, as part of your consent agenda this evening, you took action to approve a second 2-year contract with me, of which I am very pleased to continue to serve the school district effective July 1, 2014 through 2016. And that seems like a long ways off, but with all the things we need to do, it's. But I wanted to say to you how grateful I have been for the past 18 months of very hard work, very enjoyable work, and the team that I have sitting here in front of me give me the motivation to continue to do what I do every day, because these folks are the hardest working group of individuals I ever worked with in a 41-year career. You need to know that. It is wonderful to have that experience of working with people who are so driven to want to do what's best for this school district and this community. I appreciate that. I most appreciate, though, the fact that I've been so welcomed in the community. I can tell you, with now having my spouse here, life in Oshkosh is a whole lot more fun than when you're a hermit in Oshkosh. I can enjoy going out and doing things. Otherwise, attending school events was never a problem, but going out and socializing, that's really not, I'm a pretty private person. Life is far better in that sense. But you as a board, this group of individuals, and a very welcoming community has been just a positive engagement for me, and I look forward to the next 2.5 years are working together. And as I promised you back in May, June of 2012, if we keep working together well, you have 5 to 9 years. And in order to turn this institution around and this community around for its schools, that's what it will take. Mm-hmm. And I appreciate your affirmation of support to do that, but the team that I work with every day makes it happen, and my gray hair helps with making that work. but the reality is that the troopers who are here know. And again, I said to somebody yesterday, I said, it's amazing. In 18 months, nothing that has occurred here I haven't experienced before. It's only sometimes variations on the theme, but it's all there. But again, my thanks to all of you, and I'm grateful to a wonderful community that does care about its children. But you need to know how good it is to work with good people. Thank
Well,
you.
judging from your superintendent's report, I don't think we could ever have called you a hermit. All right. Any other announcements? Seeing none, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Turner?
Aye.
Turner, aye. Herzog?
Aye.
Herzog, aye. Lumberger?
Aye.
Lumberger, aye. Segnet?
Aye.
Segnet, aye. Wiedenhoff?
Aye.
Wiedenhoff, aye. Ito?
Aye.
Ito, aye. Eliza?
Aye.
Eliza, aye. Motion carries.
We are adjourned. Thank you for joining us.